And good afternoon in just a few seconds. I'm Cantor Hyman, and my pronouns are he and him, and I'm extremely happy to welcome all of you to the first of two Thursday offerings today for our fall 2021 Days of Learning. We're going to spend a little bit of time together trying to understand the broader emphasis on music and worship, but also how music continues to go beyond the aesthetic and continues to be one of the most effective and universal ways that we communicate with our world. We're going to be speaking today with some extremely lovely people, some special people with deep connection to Rodef Shalom, who have heard the calling of these sounds of music and are answering with their joyful noise. So first, we're going to hear from Matthew Fleisher, who is a product of Rodef Shalom, currently a Baltimore resident and a person who has many eclectic interests, including opera and classical music. And we're going to let him speak about this very soon. Secondly, we're going to hear from Marjorie, Goldberg, and Jonathan Fink, wife, husband team, and beloved members of our RS Orchestra, Ani Kinor. They are professional working musicians and so much more. They both regularly contribute to the yearly offerings of instrumental music in our sanctuary. And we're also going to have time at the end for questions that our viewers may have. Welcome again to you all. Just a few administrative and technical comments about the session. We are grateful for the help we are receiving from Ned Hanover, our technical moderator. And if there are any issues that you're experiencing, make sure that you message Ned directly. If you have comments or questions as we're moving along, feel free to type them into the chat so we may ask them at the appointed time. Keep yourselves muted as a rule, unless, of course, you are volunteering to speak. And please know that we are recording the session. If any of you are uncomfortable with your image being shared, please make sure that you turn off your cameras. And we will be making use of closed caption. And once again, enjoy these Days of Learning offerings. So we begin with a brief blessing for study. And in this way, we acknowledge that our time together can be as powerful as words of Torah, even when we do not specifically read words of Torah. And in this way, we are helping to make and sustain these profound connections. So Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, God, sovereign of the universe, who makes us holy through the commandments, and specifically the commandment to engage in the study of Torah. So here we go. Joining from Baltimore, we've got Matthew. And Matthew, please tell us a bit about yourself and how you grew up in and around Rodef Shalom.
Yeah, hi, everyone. So as the cantor said, my name is Matthew Fleisher, and so a little bit about myself. So I was a full-time professional opera singer, and now I'm a teacher, a chazan teacher and a voice teacher to all sorts of people, and I'll get to that in a second. But I am a part of Rodef, or I was a part of Rodef before I moved to Baltimore, because who is now my fiance, but was the partner I was on a first date with, Julia. Julia and I were on a date when we both moved back to Philly. I had just gotten back from a gig traveling to both Florida to an opera house and then Washington, D.C. to an opera house. And on our first date, Julia said to me, I think we should go to shul more. Have you heard of this place, Rodef Shalom? You know, I hear it's really accepting, a beautiful place, whatever. And I said, yeah, you know, some people have been telling me I should be going to shul more and that I should go check out Rodef Shalom. And our third date was a class at Rodef Shalom. So, and since then we went for services on Friday night, and RS became an amazing home. We were part of the Young Friends group together. And so we kind of met. Rodef Shalom is kind of our initial Jewish home, our first Jewish home as a couple. Now we're getting married, thank God. And so it ended up working out just fine. But my musical background is I started music when I was 3 on the piano. I switched to clarinet by 9. I was practicing around 3 to 5 hours a day, starting middle school, doing all sorts of ensembles in the Philadelphia area, my parents are from a little bit outside the city. So Rhode Island was not my home growing up, because I'm about 40 minutes out originally, but was in the city for all sorts of music programs, was very involved. Ended up going to college at the University of Michigan and studying voice in their music conservatory. And so I studied opera performance. And while I was there, I also worked part-time as a professional singer. And then when I left my conservatory degree, I then sang full-time, and loved that. And eventually decided I wanted to change my Shabbat practices a little bit, didn't want to work so much on Friday, Saturday night, Friday and Saturdays. And it wasn't so conducive for family life. So eventually I transitioned, decided to go back to law school. I'm now getting a JD, law degree, and a master's in public health, but I teach around 30 or 40 students, as well as a voice teacher. And funny enough, in Baltimore, because I'm Jewish, the Orthodox community kind of heard about me and is in a big need for vocal health training. And so I teach a large amount of Orthodox from very yeshivish Jews in the Baltimore community, both their cantors, so all sorts of cantors in the Baltimore community, and school teachers, just a lot of Orthodox men, as well as Chabad men in Philly also heard about me because there's a big dearth of vocal training in the Orthodox community. And so I've somehow ended up kind of having a career out of it. So yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm fascinated about the community of Baltimore. So that's really great. So if you could also speak to us a little bit about what music and musical expression means to you, and how music is incorporated into your professional pursuits, where you're able to throw music as the emphasis.
Yeah, absolutely. So, music to me, I think, was really my initial connection to God. There are some kind of Hasidic masters that talk about how we know that, when we're just souls before we're born, that, this idea that we're always learning Torah until our birth. It's when you're learning Torah, it's supposed to be musical, meaning that like before birth, we're surrounded by music. And so for me, I always thought that music was my true connection to God, and it's been that connection ever since. And so, classical was my lens because I thought it's sheer complexity. You listen to a great symphonic piece, and a lot of the composers that are actually Jewish in part. Some people were half Jewish or were Jewish and then converted out of Judaism because of Catholicism and the pressures of Catholicism and the need to convert to actually become a prolific composer in the 19th, 18th century. But Jews and just the diaspora of classical musicians have composed things so complex. I mean, you listen to a Dvorak symphony and you listen to how many voices have to come together and feel this internalized rhythm, this inhalation of sound before they start the downbeat. To me, it just seems so godly and so beyond and so religious that it became a part of my life. And so how music has played a part of my life is because I think when you're in awe of something so great and so complex and so beautiful, this something that can elicit so much emotion out of you from just a sound, right? Something we take for granted, that we're hearing all these sounds. To me, it was unbelievably evocative and drawing, and so it's always been a big part of my life. I've always been known as the musician Matthew, and kind of with the musician being the first part of that sentence, because that's what most people know me as. Even in law school, people kind of know me more as the guy who has a full-time job as a music teacher who goes to law school. So yeah, and then being a music teacher has been a really great gift. And so that I've been doing that for a number of years now. And that's been it's my income, but it's my life. I try to teach, as for free and just as a gift to the community when I can. And then I do it obviously as a job as well.
I love it. That's really fantastic. It sounds like you're very aware of the next bit of what I'm about to say, but our Bible places an emphasis upon music by putting its creation and a brief description of those who first played instruments right up front in Genesis chapter 4, verse 21, and the story of Yuval, who was the progenitor of fluted instruments. We can understand from a psychological standpoint that the effect that music has on our emotions, and over the millennia, there has been an attempt to segregate music that is used for sacred use from the music that is used everywhere else. During the Baroque period, there was the formality that was utilized to both define and measure the style of sonata. It's believed that our intent is what mainly separates these two realms. But perhaps over the years, we've blurred the division between camerata o chiesa out of a need to speak more plainly. So Matthew, just tell us a little bit about your love of classical music and how it speaks to you, and where do you see and hear it being used most intentionally?
That's a great question. So, I think the word is, where is it being used most intentionally, is fascinating, because there's a thought out there that classical music is high music, that you have this high music and low music, that classical music's high music, it's complex, that there's kind of a class association with classical music, a race association with classical music. And I really think that's a shame. I think, as a young musician, and as a young classical musician, there's a lot of thought that, you're a young guy, why classical music? Or I remember as a kid, when I was practicing 1,000,000 hours a day on clarinet, they would say, like, why classical? Like, why don't you want to go goof off and, listen to pop? And listen, I listen to pop, I've listened to rap, I listen to all sorts of stuff. I love all music. But again, in that point of, it's the complexity and the beauty, there's that, but also there's so much new things happening. There's so much life. So for instance, when I was in college, I decided to commission a piece. So commissioning a piece means I funded it through grant writing and getting nonprofits together. And the piece was about the importance of, accepting the other. We talked about this in Leviticus, but this idea of the ger. And so how do we accept the other, especially as it relates to conversations around Israeli politics? And so, in all sides, like, how do we embrace one another regardless of positioning? And so I commissioned this piece. It was by another Jewish composer. It was a Jewish composer named David Hamlin, a big prolific composer, and I funded through Jewish organizations. And the piece was a commentary, and it was a large commentary on, like, what are we really doing? What are we missing in this conversation? And the stranger and this idea of accepting other people shall be to you as one of your citizens. I think it's Leviticus 19, something 19. But yeah, and so I commissioned this piece, and it was a great hit. It was a great success. It was a ton of fun, but I'm not the only one. There are lots of people doing fun, dynamic, new things. And so where's the sweet spot of classical music? What is going on in classical music? I think it's everywhere. I think we're breaking out, but if you even look at the Metropolitan Opera, a good friend of mine, Will Liverman, he's a big guy at Opera Philadelphia, African-American guy. He just opened up the Met this season. Fire Shut Up in My Bones. It was the first opera performed at the Met written by an African-American composer. It was an enormous opera, as it was starring a young African-American guy as the lead. And his face was all over Times Square, and it was amazing. And so there's so much dynamicism in what classical music means today. And I think if you just kind of open up to being willing to hear different things, there's a lot of new things happening. I could speak on all sorts of organizations I'd recommend people checking out as well, if anyone's ever curious.
That's excellent. I feel that you've also already mentioned a few of the other genre that you might enjoy or gravitate towards. You mentioned rap, you mentioned a few other things, which are really great. So it's nice to know that, we're able to access music in multiple ways. So for a special treat, Matthew's going to demonstrate some of this amazing vocal talent. I think we're going to a video, correct?
Yeah. So I'll kind of preface the video.
Great.
So this is a really fantastic piece, and an example of how composers can do all sorts of cool things. So if people know who Schubert is, Schubert is a very famous 19th century composer, unbelievably tragic life. He died very young, but he was unbelievably prolific as well. I think he composed a little over 400 pieces in his, I think, 30 odd year lifetime. And this piece is a fun piece because it's a trio of pieces. He's a German composer. He wrote this in Italian. So it's kind of odd libretto for Schubert, which I think it's the only Italian pieces he composed for one of these three pieces. And the piece that that I'm going to show you today is, I'm not going to sing it loud because I have no pianist here, and you don't want to hear my piano skills. I left that about 15 years ago, but this piece was performed by myself, and it's kind of, you're in a whirlwind of a moment, and you'll kind of see as the storm comes, me kind of freak out. So I hope you'll enjoy.
Just one moment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really exceptional on multiple levels. I mean, um, admittedly, I don't recall hearing too much Schubert in Italian. So as you mentioned, that's about it. And it's fantastic for a lot of reasons, because the music itself, um, even though it's sung in Italian, sounds very German in my ears. So that's kind of push pull, and I appreciate it. It's really fantastic. So thank you so much for everything that you continue to give to the musical world. So that's great. Once again, we're also welcoming Marjorie Goldberg and Jonathan Fink to our discussion. So tell us a bit about yourselves and your connection to Rodef Shalom.
Me? All right, I will. So we had some children a long time ago, and at one point we decided they needed to know some Jewish people because there were none in their school, and we joined Rodef Shalom literally for Sunday school, and pleasantly we enjoyed being members. And I'd say that was probably in 2008, maybe 9 or 8. Our kids went through Sunday school, both bar and bat mitzvah here. And we started playing casually with the Cantor 2 cantors ago. And then prior to you, and Aaron was here, Rabbi Kuhn came up with the idea of the Ani Kinor Orchestra, and we were sort of founding members, which is a delight and a pleasure, because one of the things that I love about synagogue is our music, because I don't speak Hebrew, I don't read Hebrew, but I love the melodies. I also can say the same about being a musician and playing for church. I don't believe what they're saying, but I love the music in the church. I taught in a Catholic school for 16 years, so I know a lot of mass music, and I appreciate what music does for parishioners. It just adds, even when they don't feel like paying attention, you know they're listening. So that's my feeling on music in synagogue. And I have to say that if there was no music, I probably wouldn't come to services. So it is important to me that we have music here. But I also wanted to say that it's a joy to make music with our colleagues that you hire to play here. I think it's so fun. I like coming to services and watching my colleagues play when I'm not playing. It's one of the things that we like about being musicians, of course, is watching and working with our colleagues.
I love it. I love it. So you answered a little bit about the next bit, but also maybe tell your music origin story. How did music come to mean so much to both of you, and how did it sort of become your life's work? How did you sort of decide at some point that that's it, that's exactly what I want to do? And
well, we're both products of public school music programs like string class. So I started playing the violin when I was 8, and John probably started cello when he was 8 or 9. I'll let him speak for his, but we were both in public schools that had excellent string programs.
She's going to let me speak for myself.
Yeah.
It's a great day.
we gave you your own microphone.
Yeah, you have a microphone and everything. I always loved music. At one point, I thought, I want to be I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be on the Supreme Court, and I wanted to be a judge. And then I realized,
I wish you were.
I realized I wanted to play the violin more, and I went to school for violin at the Hart School of Music, and then I switched to violin while I was there. But I am still a lawyer wannabe in my head.
Is it my turn?
It's your turn.
My music origin story. So I grew up in Oregon, not in this area. And I started music in 4th grade, like she said. I got very interested in it in junior high. We had kind of I went to kind of a sort of a hippie junior high school in Eugene, Oregon, and the guy who was running the music program there, Rick Wolfgang, something about that program I got into. And for me, music has always been mostly about the social aspect of it. So when I was in junior high, I was bullied a fair amount and didn't really know where to go. And so the band room was kind of a refuge for me, basically. And I just went there because the people that I was encountering there seemed to like me and not want to shove me into lockers. And so I spent more time there and started practicing. I heard Matt say he practiced 3 to 5 hours a day. Okay, I didn't. And so I don't remember making a conscious decision to become a musician, which in some ways, you're delving into a very complicated part of my whole psyche. But in some ways, I think that is an issue with music. You have to decide so early if you're going to be a really, a musician. It's a decision that gets made often before you're conscious of what you're thinking about doing. And then you get to the other end of it and go, oh my God, now I'm a musician. What do I do? We have made lives for ourselves out of playing music and all this other surrounding stuff. And I'm very kind of in retrospect, not that we're at the end of our lives, but we've been doing this now for 25 or 30 years. But in retrospect, I'm very proud of all the various ways that we have sort of, gotten our feelers out into the world and done music in different ways. But in terms of Judaism, music is the thing about that really does speak to me, similar to what Marjorie was saying. I don't consider myself super religious, but I love to play Jewish tunes, and I feel like I love to do Kol Nidre. I think that is, to me, like, that's my favorite show of the year, so to speak. Like, I just feel, it feels so right to be playing that. And the emotions that I capture within myself, and hopefully I'm sharing with the synagogue, mean a lot to me. So it's a lot I know about.
It's really great. Yeah, I think it's often this understanding, or at least this feeling, that maybe prayers become more front and center and more powerful on those particular times of the year, those crazy special times. And so then even more so, if you become part of that conduit, like, it's such a powerful transference kind of moment when things are coming to you and being passed through you, and then you get to speak in this language that so many people are able to access. And it's so hard to find those kinds of things that are so universal and in such a great way.
And you can tell when that's happening, and it's not just at synagogue. You can tell when that's happening in any concert that you're playing, and it doesn't happen every time. And when we know that, like of the bazillions of concerts and jobs and shows that we've played, you'll get one in 10 where it's like you go, wow, that and it's not about how you played or how it sounded. It's about the connection between the audience and the performers and what it felt like.
Yeah, I love it. So for a lot of us, I always had this fantasy of being in a band, traveling from destination to destination to perform before fans, and let this music take you where it was meant to be heard. So arguably the lives of professional musicians, it's only slightly less glamorous, right? But the idea that we get to perform music with groups, as you mentioned, of other talented musicians who really touch us, the camaraderie, is a part of something grand, and in front of people who are eagerly waiting to share that offering. And it's very much in line with our fantasy of what we would want it to be. So where do your fantasies meet your realities? Where does the commitment that you've put into music really sort of come through to support your family, really?
Well, we could talk about this for about 3 hours. It's a great question.
It is a
It really
good question.
is a great question.
Well, I know, I mean, obviously we both love classical music. That's a given, obviously, but one of the, I mean, being a freelancer is a difficult lifestyle, but one of the best parts about being freelancer is all of a sudden you get a phone call and you're going to play for Pearl Jam or Stevie Wonder or Elton John and I mean, we talk about it still. We played on the Parkway for Elton John with the Philly Pops. And we only played 3 songs, but then they let us just sit there in our chairs. So we had the best seats in the house for a concert that I probably wouldn't have been able to pay to go to at that point in our lives.
Oh, it was free. It was on the Parkway.
It was free. It was on the Parkway, but we were front and I mean, literally 10
We were
feet,
on stage. Yeah.
10 feet from Elton John, which was just crazy amazing.
Yeah, the energy. I mean, it's often said that people have energy and you can feel their energy, and even arguably more so when you're around people who give off so much energy. You really.
That's a great point. But I think the other side of this is the kind of lifestyle that when we had kids, and we were still working a lot, and a lot of our work was traveling work. A lot of it was driving, driving for dollars, basically, driving to play orchestra jobs and stuff like that. But we started, and I like to think we're some of the first people in this community who have done that in the Harrisburg Symphony. We started bringing our kids out to Harrisburg, and we often joke that they don't realize it but we stayed in this like Howard Johnson's. It was literally a Howard Johnson's in Harrisburg, and the kids kind of grew up in these, the 2 same rooms every other weekend or 1 weekend a month or whatever it was. And the place was not particularly nice, but they didn't know it. They thought they thought the donuts that were in the.
I miss Howard Johnson.
Yeah,
I miss the clam strips.
But I mean, that's where the fantasy kind of, circles into the ground a little bit, because it's like not
glamorous.
It's not glamorous. A lot of times it isn't glamorous. And even when you're working for a glamorous show, sometimes you are not the glamour part. We could both tell all kinds of stories where the star has fancy dressing rooms and catering and everything, and we're, in a truck outside,
It's like the 12th deck on a cruise ship.
It's a 12th deck on a cruise ship. Exactly. But I think we're all kind of looking for that. What you were saying, I think of as like the Grateful Dead, like following the band around the world, right? And if only you could be in the group, and what would it be like to do that, and we've done, tours and that kind of stuff. And it really is that fun. It's a great way to spend time,
with musicians
and performing for people in different places. And I don't know what it is about that seems so romantic, but it is kind of romantic. It is romantic to get on a bus after a show and, crack open a bottle of wine. And, it's kind of it's a different lifestyle that most people don't get to
full body experience.
That's right.
Every sense is sort of stimulated.
Well, and full body, it is almost like, even if you have a show at 8:00 at night, you plan every minute up until that. And sometimes you cram too much in.
Right.
And, you stick that extra student in because you want to squeeze that extra dollar.
Right.
Or whatever appointment you have. But it's always on your mind. That's what you have that night.
You back everything up from that. I can't. It's like the show is at 7:30. Okay, so we need to be in the building by 7. So that means we have to leave the house by 6:30. So that means that I have to be done with whatever it is I'm going to do and be home by whatever, fill in the blank, because I have to take a nap and then I have to take a shower and start all over. And like starting your day at 8:00 at night, especially as we get older, it takes more. And this one of the things that's been really difficult about coming back from the pandemic is we kind of forgot how to do that. And it's like all of a sudden, you show up at 8:00 at night on a Saturday and you're expected to concentrate really hard for 2.5 hours now. And you lose that muscle a little bit. At least I have. I don't know.
It is muscle memory. You're right.
Well, I can tell you, and speaking of opera, I played a bunch of opera concerts last week, and it's so exhausting. And they were 3-hour services, and I'm used to 2.5, but that was from before the pandemic. When we would stream stuff during the pandemic, nothing was more than 90 minutes. So like a 3-hour rehearsal every single day
Yeah, your brain's just like,
I was
oh my God.
fried. I forgot how hard it is.
Yeah.
And I was just saying to him, we have a concert on Saturday and then I have to go drive and play another concert. And I don't even know how I'm going to do that, but you just figure it out and you do it. But you definitely plan accordingly. And, you know,
Yeah, living our lives in reverse.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Backing everything up from some
Yeah.
event. I mean, I'm sure that as a
You
cantor,
get crazy.
you get that way
you
too.
get extremely good at it, I
Yeah,
would say.
yep.
Yeah.
you know, when you
Um,
have to shower, you know, when you have to finish eating.
It's a lot of faith in your ability to actually meet your own time frame.
Yep.
So that's what it is.
And
but
that's why it's always
know
so,
thyself. you
when
know?
somebody doesn't, it's such an event at a job. If somebody, you know, screws that up and they're late or they run in at the last second, you know, when a musician runs in at the last second at a job, it's you know, kind of considered a little bit rude to everybody else because now everybody's worried, you know, and if it's a pit or, you know, somebody has to run on stage, we have to make room for them, the whole thing. So you have this responsibility to everybody to get there.
Yeah, it really
weird.
demonstrates exceedingly clear that relationship between musicians and a understanding of time.
Mhm.
So, and
really
that's a
great
whole
point.
other 3-hour discussion.
It's a really great point.
But our ability to, you know, demonstrate that respect.
Yeah.
It's really that, and that's how it sort of manifests.
Well, you know, it's funny when we come to synagogue, I still want to leave early and he'll go, you're not playing. We don't have to leave.
We don't have to
We're
get
allowed
there
to walk in
We don't have
late.
to get there at 30 minutes.
Nobody will yell at us if we walk in late,
Yeah.
but we're conditioned to
That's
just.
our own internal
Yep.
response.
Yeah,
to
I show
how-
up everywhere half an hour early. I mean,
Yep.
that's just the way it's just the way it
the
is.
monster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
is
going away anytime
The
soon.
monster. I'm so glad you mentioned earlier Ani Kinor. Maybe just a little bit about its birth, its inception, and how you guys just contribute so much to making it happen. You know, between the musicians that you organize and the music library that I've inherited, which is fantastic and helpful. And we can, you know, instantly go to something and modify and transpose. And it's great. It's just a treasure.
Well, like I said, I know that Rabbi Kuhn was inspired by a synagogue in New York, I believe. And at that time, I think Cantor Frankel was new and he shared with her that desire. And we met her separately from that, just, you know, she's the cantor and we started chatting. And I knew that she loved all kinds of vocal music like you do. It's not just Jewish music. And I knew she was studying voice. I knew she liked musical theater and folk songs and, you know, not just Jewish music. So she took Rabbi Kuhn's idea and sort of made it what she wanted it to be. And she knew that we were string players and I made it very clear that we are not improvisers like our lovely clarinet and percussion who
So good.
for our people
So
that
good.
watch the musicians, they have music stands, but generally the bass player, the clarinet player and the percussion player are just making it up what they want, following a vocal line that Brad is singing. And string players are not as good at that. And even if we are, if there's 3 or 4 string players, there needs to be some plan of action on the page. So I had offered to write some arrangements, see if that she and Rabbi Kuhn liked that idea. And of course it now it is what it is and it clearly worked. And one of the things though is I didn't know a lot of these songs. And like with you, I say, I don't know that one. Can you send me a video so I know what it sounds like? And then I haven't arranged for you yet, but I know that I've seen your music choices. And with Aaron, what I would do is if I didn't know the song, I would ask for a video or I would see her sing it here in synagogue and then envision in my head, oh, strings would sound good here. And then there were always like, oh, can you do this? Can you do this? And easy to fix. And as you know, with using Finale, which is a music notation program,
Dream.
we can just change the key.
Whatever.
If you have a cold and you need it a step lower, we could just put it a step lower. And it's nice with the computer age and I am not a big techie, but I know how to use this program and I know how to share it with you and you can share back with me. And I like how we can collaborate that way and not just have to sit in a room and scribble No, it's not a page.
So that's on so many levels, that's great. But even another level that maybe people don't necessarily consider is that it wasn't just the inspiration of the leadership. The leadership had a vision. They got the right people to sort of look for models that are successful, and you sort of observe that and interpreted it. But then it's another thing to sort of affect the culture of the synagogue. And that is where it really is right now. That's the beautiful testament to the success, is that it's reflected back in commitment from generosity of many people who really do such a beautiful thing and make and sustain the culture of our congregation. So that's on a whole other level. You know, it started off as a adoration that was able to be transmitted to all those different people. So
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if people know this, but we get paid. You treat us like professional musicians. I mean, there are times that I do volunteer and that John volunteers, but when you see Ani Kinor there, every musician's getting paid. And, you know, just like in theater and classical music and opera, nothing would happen. There would be no show without donors.
It shows a respect
Yeah.
for the art and the artist, and it reflects so many years when it wasn't that way. So it is such a great time to be a musician and an artist, because there is that appreciation. Whenever we broadcast music, for example, over the internet, and we acknowledge all of the composers. We belong to an organization that gets them because it's transmission, the appropriate royalties for such a thing. We pay a licensing fee, and that reflects our value as being something that is authentic and that lives to support those artists who deserve to be supported.
Right.
So it is such a great thing to be able to get into our culture and to be able to support it that way.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because earlier we were talking about, you were talking about the Baroque period, and the relationship between the professional musician and religious organizations is you know, there's books about that, you know. But the thing that I wanted to say, I don't think she's quite giving herself enough credit, but I also think we need to give the synagogue a lot of credit, is that, you know, we have this fund that helps pay for the musicians, are paid a professional wage. One of the reasons that it works so well, I believe, is that the musicians that Marge hired for this to begin with, the founding members, some of the best musicians in the city, you know, excluding myself, of course, but Joe Nero, who plays percussion, I'm constantly amazed by, you know, you give that guy, you know, a little thing to shake and a djembe and the chimes, and it's like, you know, I don't even know how he does it, but it's just amazing. So the quality level, and this also goes to the arrangements too. Like we recorded a CD of that stuff, and I mean, I'd put it up against anything. I think it sounds, it's professional level. So when you come to the synagogue and you hear that group, you're hearing people who, it's not, and I'm nothing against, you know, the volunteer, you know, musician in a church or a synagogue, which is also has a role. Yeah. But when people are there to, I just believe that the higher quality of hiring real musicians to play elevates the whole thing. And I give so much credit to Rodolphe Shalom for having instituted that and for having maintained it, and we're thrilled that you're, you know, is interested in continuing to do it. Yeah. And it's really been one of the great joys, I think, of last, you know, decade of doing this. It's really been wonderful.
That's great. So why don't we hear a little bit of your artistry, if we can do that? Thank you so much.
I'll talk about what he's doing. I'm not going to play because I'm nursing an injury, and like I said, I have to play the music of ABBA and opera highlights.
This is your life, folks.
Yes. So, but John's going to play a piece. I actually arranged it for solo cello based on Adonai Ori, which I quickly Googled and Brad told me means God of light, which I now remember I was picking songs to arrange for solo cello, not for a specific holiday. And I think that's why I picked this one, because I thought, oh, we could use it at any sort of event. So you'll hear the melody of Adonai Ori, and then you'll hear like another section that's like a little cello fantasia based on it.
Well, I'm going to turn. Put it closer.
I think that was the right way to do it. I have no idea if this will sound. How this is.
It's better than not.
It's better than
No, you did great.
somebody should say something if they can't hear it at all.
That's powerful. Great writing also. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Arrangement.
I really like that arrangement a lot.
It speaks, I mean, I can sort of hear the other instruments that are not playing. So I with the swell, I think that it's really beautiful.
There's something about that melody. I remember hearing one of the clarinet player playing it one day, and it's very like anybody can sing it. The melody it's just so it's an accessible, beautiful melody, and I think solo cello is like your voice, and so that song in particular, I remember thinking this will be a good one for cello to play.
Love it.
Yeah.
Really fantastic. So this is a question for everybody on our panel, including Matthew. Thank you very much. Over the years that you've all been involved at RS, there's been probably a few changes in the leadership of music and how everything gets sent along. And some of it's been exciting and welcoming, and some of it has been probably scary with that healthy dose of the unknown. So of all of that, which music sort of has been some of your favorites, and at any stage? Why? Maybe a little bit. And which music would you perhaps like to see playing a broader role in our worship? So we'll go to the first one. The first one is which music is like your favorite? Yeah, Matthew too.
Sure, I can speak to this quickly. So it's a running joke in my house with my fiance now of how much I love the ensemble at RS. And because I'm a clarinetist, I would flip out when the clarinetist played. I would go bananas. Every time we went to shul, it was so important to me and so much fun. And so Julia used to always kind of kid about like, oh, we're going to the clarinetist, Matthew. You're really excited. So yeah, I think all the music of RS is very exciting. I mean, it's been a little bit since the pandemic, since I've been there in person, but no, it was always such a treat when I was there.
Wonderful.
Well, I'm going to go way back actually, because I actually got involved in music here a little bit before you did. When we first started coming here with our kids, I didn't grow up Jewish. I grew up in a town where there aren't any Jews. And there was one synagogue. My mom took me to Hebrew school one day and got into some kind of epic disagreement with the rabbi, which the story of which I do not know to this day. And that was it. Like, we never went back. And so like, as our kids were, coming here every week and going to these services and stuff, I started to really kind of explore this. And this was when Jamie and Jody were still here. And I volunteered to play in some of these things, and it was fun. And I was exploring some of this stuff, but it was, and I don't mean this in the way that volunteer music is disorganized. It was disorganized, and I can't handle, like, I get anxiety about that kind of thing. Like I have to know what's going to happen when I get there, and so it was just a little too. It was just a little bit difficult for me. Yeah, and nothing was ever in the right key, and I can't really transpose on site, and so it felt, a little disconnected. And I think that the musical situation here, and I hope this is appropriate to talk about, has really evolved in a way that's fitting to an organization this important to the city. We should have the best Jewish music. And not just us, but I saw you guys have that band the other, like, we should be a center for Jewish music, in my mind. I mean, that should be a role of a modern Reform synagogue. And I think it is. And I've seen that evolution happen over the last decade or 12 years. And I just think it's great. And it's a thrill to have even a small part in it.
I love it. I look up to my colleagues, other people who have been in the community longer than, well longer than I have, but going back and really secured that that important sense of music that extends throughout the city, but really also into the burbs. I know right along, our main line area and all, they really have some good people who have beautiful heart in it. So, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I wish there were classical Jewish composers, because I do like classical music. And, there's, like Matthew said, some halfies, but, and there's a couple pieces, like Prokofiev wrote a piece based on a Hebrew theme, but Block, right? But something that we could all do. I think that would be fun. Some sort of Jewish chamber music, because we both like chamber music, of course, and vocal and strings,
How about the Bernstein Mass?
Yeah, I think the Bernstein Mass might be a little big for the synagogue.
I could definitely honestly say I personally know some Jewish musicians who write for more classical music, and who of course are influenced by some of the bigger musical pieces from the 30s to the 60s within the Jewish world.
Right.
But there are some current classically trained and classically motivated composers of Jewish music. But to your point, you won't hear it very often.
Right.
You don't, or certainly not enough for it to be something that's going to take a hold and affect the community.
Well, I remember like 3 years ago at one of our gigs, we played an oratorio by Block. I'd never heard it before. Of course, I've heard all this solo cello and piano music, and it's all based on Jewish
But
themes.
the sacred
But it was
service,
the
is-
sacred, yeah. And I was
It's-
like, what?
it's a beloved group of music that is just like the name implies. It is sacred.
Yeah, and this huge choral and orchestral piece, our conductor in Harrisburg Symphony is Jewish, and he knew of it. I was like, how did I never know this? And then I realized, well, nobody else is going to program it because they're programming the Mozart Requiem, or
You have to you
You
have
need
to
the
be
right
very
audience.
intentional
Mhm.
with your timing and your introduction of that, and it is something that would be just absolutely magnificent
yeah,
for
well, and
anybody
it's,
to listen to, let alone to be involved in its production.
at this point in our careers, rarely is there a piece that shows up unless it's brand new that I don't know. And I was like, how do we not know this? And, I think, like you said, there's a time and a place for a piece like that.
There's whole bunches of pieces by all kinds of people that the orchestras are not, they're going to program Bach, Beethoven, and Mendelssohn and Schubert and Shostakovich, unless somebody gives them a compelling reason to move off of that track. You know what I mean? Like the Black Lives Matter movement, or something like that. So, okay, now we have to do pieces
Pivot.
by African Americans. So
Or to be aware of it.
to be aware of it, right? Otherwise they just kind of clank along doing their usual thing, and it takes a lot to push these things in different directions.
Right, because on the other end of it, you have people who will come up and say, how come you didn't play my favorite XYZ? Or,
Right, exactly.
or I grew up with that, or I love that, and that means so much to me.
Right.
Which, by the way, I love to hear still, because it means people are very intentional about how they feel about what they're listening to, and that's where the dialogue can come in a very healthy way. So you have to respect that person just as much.
And a lot of those pieces are amazing. I mean, I think Nutcracker is an amazing example of this. They put on like 30 Nutcracker shows a year. That's how many people want to go
and come back
year after year after year after year after year. And so it's this experience that they have, over. And same thing with like our holiday pop show at the Philly Pops. We typically, this year we're only doing 8 or something, but we usually do like 15, and every one of them is packed. The music is important to folks.
Yeah.
By the way, there's no
it's
Jewish
nourishment.
music on that show.
Pardon?
There will be no Jewish music.
One Hanukkah
There'll be
song.
like one Hanukkah.
Well, there's a large bias that first of all, that the music doesn't exist and therefore is not worth pursuing or looking for. And I would argue that there is some very beautiful and again, intentful Hanukkah music out there, and that's where a good cantor comes into being a decent resource. So when the choir director from Central High or whatever calls up and says, can you give me a lead on some really good Jewish music that is not dreidel, dreidel,
Right.
dreidel, or I have a little candle or whatever. So and that goes beyond it. It exists. I know of it. All they have to do is ask for it. But that takes a very open-minded director and someone who could go out and ask for that stuff, because it takes effort. And sometimes they may not have a Jewish student in that room to sort of feed that need, so they don't have that reinforcement. But so it has to be sort of innately within them to be respectful towards the tradition.
I'm not going to say anything more. I mean,
It's good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Fantastic. So anybody out there have any questions? Ned, I don't know if anybody's been asking questions or maybe has one now.
There have been several questions. I'm going to go back to earlier, and question from Matt, from Gail, who says, I'd be interested in what Orthodox men want to learn. Never thought about them caring about musical proficiency. I'd also be interested in Matthew's transition to voice from instruments. It seems like a big shift.
Sure, yeah, happy to speak on both. So I'll say quickly about my transition to voice is it's kind of an odd story. I really had never considered voice. Puberty was rough. Getting a low voice like this, it's not the easiest time in the world to be a 13-year-old boy. And I was playing clarinet in all sorts of ensembles. And if you know Settlement Music School, they have a chamber ensemble. And I was 17, applying to college on clarinet. And my chamber ensemble instructor kept asking me to take voice lessons, and I said no. I had no interest. I loved opera, but no interest in being a singer. I thought it was like I thought singers weren't real musicians, and I was an instrumentalist, and I was a real musician. And poo-pooed it. And she kept saying, no, really, I'm going to kick you out of the group if you don't take a voice lesson. I think you're going to do a lot better on voice than you will clarinet. There's a zillion clarinetists, but not a lot of guys with low voices. Give it a try. Finally, I said yes. And about 4 months later, I applied to college. So it was a kind of serendipitous reason that I got into voice and then became an opera singer quickly. It just kind of it was easier to take up because I was already a pretty deep musician at that point. So I knew how to practice. I knew how to think about practice and music and all sorts of stuff. And then in terms of the Orthodox community, there's a lot of, and I came in with my own biases on the Orthodox community and their appreciation for music when I first started teaching, which the Orthodox community, which about 2 years ago. But really, they love music. A lot of people love classical music. A lot of people love jazz. I think because of people want to be snazzy, meaning they want to be like modest. They don't often talk about it, what music they listen to. But the Lubavitch community, the Chabad community, loves music. They are so passionate about music. I sometimes go to, these guys have become friends, and sometimes I go to like their shul on a Friday night, and they're singing, songs that you sing on Friday night at shul. And the liveliness and the joy that they get from music is enormous. And so some guys, I'm not going to out teach them in terms of Hebrew music or music in Hebrew that is like Talmudic in nature, or like a psalm or something, because I didn't go to yeshiva, and so I'm not there with them. But I can talk classical and jazz and all sorts of fun stuff. Really, their only real thing is some guys don't listen to music that's sung by a woman, but even that has a lot of leniency. For the most part, a lot of my guys are kind of just open to whatever. And these are guys with the full beard and black hat, and yet they, you ask them, do you like Miles Davis? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I love Miles Davis. That's what I listen to in the car to, whatever. So there's a lot of openness out there, and then I teach them how to sing better and how to use their voice in a healthier way. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, great. So let me throw out another question for Marjorie and John. So does playing sacred music add something spiritual for you, no matter what the genre is?
I can definitely speak to that. I think I alluded to it earlier that I actually like playing church services. And while, like I said, it's not about what the liturgy is, it's just the power of the music. And I see how sometimes kids are bored in church, but when a song comes that they like, they perk up. Same with synagogue music. And I think John spoke to this about you can feel when an audience likes a show. And I feel like when music starts in any sacred service, you can feel somebody might be playing on their phone or just looking at the program. They definitely sit up and take notice and want to participate. And there's something very satisfying about being a little piece in that puzzle.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So, all right, another question. Ellen, what's your question? Unmute yourself, and what's your question?
Yeah, thanks, Ned. So I thought you said earlier, Matt, that you wanted to speak about when you were studying to become a musician and you were practicing so many hours a day. Is that something you wanted to speak to? I was interested to hear that because as a violinist through high school, I was required to practice an hour a day, and sometimes I didn't even want to do that. So were you practicing that much because it was a joy to you, or you felt you had to? What was that all about for you?
Sure, I'm happy to speak on that, Ellen. So, at first when I was really young, so I started so young. So when you start at 3, kind of the terrible twos of being a musician, where you're trying to get into it, and you're like, I don't want to practice, I'm not into it. By 10, I had been a musician for 7 years, so I'd already really loved music. I already kind of gotten in the groove of practicing, so I knew I liked it. And the other panelists spoke to like how life is hard as a musician in high school and middle school, and it's not always easy. And for me, I had a hard time making friends. I went to Germantown Academy when I was really young, and then Abington Friends School for high school. And there wasn't a lot of musicians. It was kind of like me and maybe 1 or 2 other people that were like really serious, and then a few people who like kind of goofed off a bit. But it was like it was the place that I felt most at ease. And so I, to my parents' chagrin, and we fought it. You can ask my parents to this day, we fought like unbelievably, because I would do my homework in 30 minutes. I refused to spend more than a half an hour because I would want to spend 4 hours practicing my clarinet and learning pieces and getting ready. I was in the youth orchestra downtown, and ensembles downtown, and all sorts of ensembles in school and jazz ensembles. And so I'd practice, and then I would spend the rest of the night watching videos of musicians that I loved, and being really nerdy about it till midnight. And then I would go to bed and wake up at 6 and get ready for school or whatever I had to do, because I lived a little bit away from school, and then listen to music on my way to school. And then, every chance I got, put my headphones back in and listen to music. So for me, it was just one of those things that, I'm in law school as a means to an end, but as I said, like I'm a musician that happened to, I don't know, say, I don't want to travel anymore. Because the hard part about being an opera singer, which is the reason I was hesitant to be an opera singer, is it's very hard to be a city opera singer, to be an opera singer in one location. You can do it. You kind of have to have a portfolio of different gigs that you have to teach and sing in the opera chorus and other choruses. But I did that in Philly, and it's definitely tough. I was working a lot of hours. So whereas when I was an instrumentalist, it was a little more alluring because I could be part of orchestras. There's a little more options when you're not after a soloist career, which is what I did. So yeah, that's kind of my practicing history.
Okay, thank you. Bención, are you there? Do you have a question? Please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, technical error. I apologize.
Okay. And I don't think I have any more questions. Did I miss anybody's question? Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I have a comment or two.
Okay.
I can tell you that I watched Rabbi Kuhn transition from a lot more liturgy to a lot less liturgy and a lot more music. And that was a 10-year transition for him. Somebody mentioned they love the clarinet with a little combo. I also love when they add the violin. It's sort of like a fiddler on the roof dancing behind the service. I would also mention, somebody said, what kind of music would you like to hear? I'd like to hear more secular music in the service. I know Aaron performed a Bob Dylan song that was recorded by Adele. I mean, it's totally popular, but it was wonderful. And I guess, Cantor, you did a version of Uvinu Malkeinu, not the Max Janowski, which I love, and it was wonderful also. So I like to see the changes.
Yeah, there's, I believe that there's a good place for just about everything. And it's a matter of recognizing that we need the opportunity, of course, to be able to speak with these, sometimes it's the same words, but with these other colors. It's like using all the colors of our palette and being able to recognize that there's space for other musical opportunities that really enhance the text when done correctly and with intent, and really respectful to the multiple ways that we like to to try and communicate.
Yeah, done correctly with intent. That's wonderful. Sure.
Excellent. Yeah, wonderful. Anything else?
I did have one new question pop up for you, Cantor,
Okay.
which was a request for you to tell a little bit about your own musical biography.
My biography. Well, I feel like I've been doing a lot of that, but I'm very happy just to hit the highlights. You know, I'm certainly lucky to be able to be living my dream, but it's to recognize that the dream started extremely young. I was lucky enough to be born into, certainly not in my immediate family, but within my global family. I have other musicians in my genes, and so in the DNA, some really good potential. And when I was probably 2.5, 3 years old, we had a Kimball Swingerline organ that lived in our home, which was the custom in the Midwest. You didn't always have to have a piano. You could have an organ when you go to the mall, and they had the Kimball store there, and everybody had to get in there and hit the pedals a little bit, you know. But we had one in our home. I don't know where my parents had the whatever to just say, we need this again, that and the shag carpet and all the good stuff. So
It has like the
stucco wall,
basso stop on it.
Exactly.
Boom,
Yeah, and
boom.
so we had, so 2.5, 3 years old, I sat down and discovered the beauty of something called magic chord, where you hit one finger and hold it, and it plays that chord with all of the wonderful rhythms that you can set up. But then, you plunk out the melody with your right hand to the best of your index finger and your patience. So when you're 2.5, 3 years old, that's how it starts. But then by the time my parents were fond of saying they walked in when I was 5, and they heard music coming from the other room. They didn't know if it was TV was on. I was by that point I had learned how to play the theme from Johnny Sacco and the Flying Robot. So that was my gateway into fooling my parents into thinking that I had something. And from then, like when I was 11 years old, I think I got my first guitar when I was 11, and locked myself in a room and didn't come out until I was 13. So over those 2 years, I sat down in front of the radio and played the
Smoke on the Water,
the 50s and 60s station, because those chords were there were 3 chords to a song tunes, or whatever. And, you know, and then eventually you once you exhaust that, then you flip the dial and you're listening to stuff from the 60s and the 70s, and then getting inspired by all of the singer-songwriters. So by the time I was 12, I had been, you know, I've been playing guitar for a while. And then when I was 13, you know, you get tapped on the shoulder, and then someone says, why don't you go teach in the religious school music? So I was able to sort of find out very quickly that I could be a professional living my life, doing exactly what I love, and being able to support myself. And my mentor confirmed that. And then I've been that's my journey, you know, which I've been doing everything ever since 12 to get to this congregation. And this is living the dream.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's great. So we are certainly grateful to all of the organizers and coordinators who give an incredible amount to our community in so many ways. So we want to acknowledge them, and some of them who are actually viewing and watching this. So that's great. We're thankful to our panelists, Matthew, Marjorie, and Jonathan, who have shared their talents and a lot of themselves, and that is the gift that I treasure. I'm blessed each day to be serving a dynamic and inspiring congregation, and I step into this role with a glad and eager heart, and a heavy dose of respect. I thank our technical maven, Ned Hanover, and I'm grateful to all of you and your questions and your interests into both how and why music makes us feel something way beyond the prayer book, way beyond the text alone. And we say, Baruch atem bevo'enu, uvaruch atem b'tzeitenu. Blessed are you who come to this place, and blessed are you who are able to go beyond this place and leave here with all of your paths filled with harmony and music. So thanks.
Thanks for having us, Brad.
Thanks. Bye, Mom.
Thanks, everybody.